Many Star Wars fans grew up on the original Battlefront 2 from 2005, and if you did, you probably remember the game's story campaign. The campaign tells the story of the 501st Legion, from the first Battle of Geonosis to the Battle of Hoth, putting the player in the shoes of a Fett clone in one of the galaxy's most elite military units. This campaign is framed as the journal of the 501st, complete with the narration of a single trooper who lived through it all. It's a fun little story, but it's also highly problematic as far as lore goes, as we indicated in our recent long-form video on the history of the Legion. In this video, we'll be discussing why.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
For those of you who haven't played Battlefront 2's campaign, let's start with a quick summary. Technically, the game's story starts with a tutorial mission set during the first Battle of Geonosis, but the campaign proper picks up 3 years later during the Outer Rim sieges at the end of the Clone Wars. The first half of the Journal of the 501st describes the unit's service in the last days of the war, during which the unit was apparently involved in nearly all of the major battles happening at the time. According to the journal, the 501st saw action on Megiddo before being recalled to fight in the Battle of Coruscant, following which it saw action on Felucia, Kashyyyk, and Utapau before returning to Coruscant to participate in Operation Nightfall under the command of Darth Vader. The second half of the journal describes the unit's service during the time of the Empire. The clones became the first stormtroopers and spent the dark times putting down various insurrections. Per the journal, the 501st launched a violent coup on Naboo and put down a separatist remnant on Mustafar during the Empire's early years. In 12 BBY, it also put down the Kaminoan clone rebellion, following which the Stormtrooper Corps started to phase out Fett clones, though, according to the Journal of the 501st, remained pure Jango. After Kamino, the journal skips ahead a decade to the start of the Galactic Civil War, chronicling the 501st's fight against the Alliance to restore the Republic. The narrator describes battles on Polis Massa and aboard the Death Star, then the boarding of the Tantive 4 and the Imperial ground assault on the rebel base on Yavin 4. The journal concludes with the Battle of Hoth, which the clone veteran narrator frames as the day the Empire crushed the Rebel Alliance, though the audience obviously knows better. It's a fun campaign and a decent story, but it falls apart upon critical examination. There are many things in the Journal of the 501st that don't quite add up, as well as a handful of inconsistencies with existing Legends lore, indicating that perhaps the narrative we've been fed by Battlefront 2 is not entirely accurate. Let's start with the elephant in the room, the narrator. The Journal of the 501st is supposedly narrated by a clone veteran who is present for all the battles he discusses, as he describes his personal experiences at several points. That's a hell of a service record. Fighting from Geonosis to Hoth is a straight 25 years of active duty, which is 50 years of aging for clones. Being some random frontline grunt for that long despite fighting in the worst of 2 wars is improbable enough as it is, but when you consider clones' accelerated aging, the whole story starts to come into question. This guy would have been the clone equivalent of 70 years old during the Battle of Hoth. There's no way the Empire, with its vast reserves of eager recruits and fresh clones, would have kept him around that long. This also applies to another odd part of the Journal of the 501st. It alleges that the clones were regularly called upon to serve as pilots, despite being ground troops, fighting in the skies above Coruscant, Kashyyyk, Mustafar, and Yavin 4. This is plausible for the Clone Wars era 501st, since the Republic Starfighter Corps was always getting its ass kicked and needed all the pilots it could get. But even then, it's nonsensical that this would continue under the Empire, which had all the pilots it needed. Logical inconsistencies aside, there are also a fair few lore inconsistencies with the journal when it comes to the sequence of battles it describes. Between the Battle of Coruscant and Operation Nightfall, the 501st veteran claims to have fought on Felucia, Kashyyyk, and Utapau, playing a decisive role in each of these battles that, according to most sources, were largely fought by other GAR units. But there's a serious problem with this assertion. There were only 2 days between the Battle of Coruscant and Order 66. Even if the 501st flew off to Felucia the exact second the Battle of Coruscant ended, accomplished its mission there in a few hours, then immediately flew off to Kashyyyk to break the blockade and fend off the first wave of separatist ground troops at Kachiro, and then promptly linked up with the 7th Sky Corps to attack Utapau, it would still probably all take longer than 2 days. It's completely impossible for the order of events presented in the first half of the 501st Journal to be correct. The only way it would even start to make sense would be if there were different detachments of the 501st being dispatched to all these objectives, but again, that would then also make the narrator's supposed personal involvement in everything impossible. Another inconsistency involves the journal's downplaying of how Fett clones were phased out of the Stormtrooper Corps. According to the narrator, the process only began in 12 BBY, and even then, it was slow, and the 501st Legion apparently remained solely composed of Fett clones. This is inconsistent with the Legion's earlier appearances in Star Wars media, in which the unit is composed exclusively of recruited soldiers, as well as in the original trilogy films, in which the 501st Stormtroopers we see have slightly different heights and don't sound like Fett clones in the slightest. Nearly all prior expanded universe material suggested that clones were rare in the Imperial military by the time of the Galactic Civil War. Now, before some know-it-all in the comments beats us to the punch, yes, we're well aware that all of this is a mix of game mechanics and the kind of writing that you'd expect for an add-on campaign for a game that isn't primarily story-driven. However, the Battlefront 2 campaign is still canon within the Legends continuity, and as such, we're going to examine it at face value as we would any other source. To start with that, we're going to go back to the journal's end, a triumphant description of how the rebels got trounced at Hoth. Based on how this is framed as the end of the Alliance, you might be led to believe that the veteran is telling his story before the Battle of Endor, but there's one small problem with that idea. The narrator mentions the second Death Star at the end. That wasn't public knowledge until after the Battle of Endor, during which it was destroyed. In our opinion, this makes it more likely that his story is being told after Endor, and its framing of the Battle of Hoth and omission of the Battle of Endor were a deliberate choice. That's because the Journal of the 501st is obviously Imperial Propaganda. All of the inconsistencies we mentioned earlier make sense in that light. All that stuff doesn't add up because it's just lies. Obviously, the veteran narrates from a staunchly pro-Imperial perspective, as any 501st trooper would, but the story as a whole would make much more sense if it were an Imperial fabrication, describing real events from an idealized point of view that casts the men of the 501st as unstoppable action heroes that could do anything. Given its speculative post-Endor nature, it's possible that this was put out to rally support for the Empire after the death of Palpatine. No matter what though, the 501st narrator is a liar and either a subconscious or knowing Imperial propagandist. Hell, he might not have even been a real Fett clone. Now, that's just our theory, but if you ask us, it's the only one that makes sense. Do you agree? And if not, what are your thoughts on the Journal of the 501st? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.